Happy Monday. Thank you for joining me for this week's session of Unlocking the Magic of Leadership. Now, this week we are focusing on the third key, galvanizing your employees, and doing so by looking at the first myth of leadership, that leadership is making everyone happy. Now, if you think about the best leader that you've ever had, that individual probably frustrated you at least a few times. They probably held you accountable to pretty high standards. They probably didn't let you get away with a whole lot. Does that sound like making somebody happy? No. When we go into leadership, many times we start thinking that we have to keep everybody happy. We have to keep our organization happy. We have to keep every individual employee happy. We have to avoid the difficult conversations. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings.
Summer, I want them to like me.
I feel you. I do. When I first became a leader, I also thought that was effective leadership. But what I quickly realized is if you're trying to make everybody happy, chances are you're not going to make anybody, including yourself, happy. When you have teams, the individuals on your teams need different things. And that's why when we think about how do we take care of the individuals on our team, it is, just like it sounds, an individualized approach. Some people are going to want very direct, very blunt, very give it all to me, rip the Band-Aid off fast kind of feedback. Others are still going to want direct feedback, but they're going to want you to ease into it a little bit. Pull the Band-Aid off slow, not quite so fast. Some individuals on your team are going to be really focused on the details, and it's going to drive them absolutely bonkers when the details aren't hit. Other people are going to be really interested in driving new things, getting stuff started, not necessarily finishing it. And so when you have these different personalities on your team and these different types of individuals on your team, how do you balance those? By being fair and consistent. Now, I want to be clear on consistent. When we're talking about being consistent, we're not talking about everybody gets the exact same thing. We're talking about if you hold one person accountable to making sure they hit deadlines, you're holding everybody accountable to making sure they hit deadlines. If you're holding somebody up to a certain standard, you're holding the entire team up to a certain standard. But if one of your employees comes to you and says, hey, my significant other just got a rare aggressive form of cancer, they cannot get sick because of the treatments that they're undergoing. Is it possible for me to work from home? Then talk to your HR team. Find out, is that a possibility? It doesn't mean everybody on your team gets to work from home. It means that this individual in this circumstance may, depending on your organization and their policies, may have an exception made. So when we think about individualized leadership, it's taking care of the individuals while also taking care of the team. One of the first ways that you can do that is look and see, what does your team need? What are they responsible for? What are those areas that as a leader you can let slide? What are other areas that as a leader you can't let slide, regardless of who's doing it? What are those areas that are not going to be as critical and other areas that are going to be super critical? On the front lines working at Disney, one of the areas that was not super critical was making sure that we were following all of the policies and procedures around guests and returns. Because what was more critical was taking care of the guest. And so if I had to have a conversation with a cast member and that cast member did everything that they could to take care of the guest, then it's going to be a different conversation than if that cast member absolutely dug in their heels and refused to take care of the guest because of this specific policy. Think about what your organization does, what they expect from your team, and then what your team needs. When we can figure out what that looks like, then we can be more consistent, more fair, but also have a more individualized approach. Another way that we can make sure that we are taking care of our teams is to look and see who has strengths and opportunities and what are ways that we can rely more on strengths. Okay, so let me explain this. When I say rely less on opportunities, there is a baseline. So there is a baseline of expectations that we have for all of our employees. Working in restaurants and retail, one of the baselines that I had was that you needed to show up on time. So when thinking about that, that was something that was required. My team had to show up on time. So if you were bad with time management, that was an opportunity that we could deal with in certain areas, but you still had to be at work on time. But if you're bad at time management, then I wasn't going to send you to a time management class and try and make you good at time management. Instead, once we met that baseline of you will be at work on time, you will end your breaks on time, all of that, then I, as the leader, would adjust to that individual. If I knew that I needed something from them on Monday, I would tell them it was actually due Friday at 9 a.m. So I would have it to review before the Monday when I had to turn it in. So that's what I mean, relying on the strengths of your teams, understanding their opportunities, and how can you shore that up. And the third and final piece to breaking the myth that leaders keep everybody happy is understanding that your team, as humans, not just your team, humans, we are hyper aware of what somebody gets versus what we get. And so there may be that example of you have the employee whose partner has an aggressive and rare form of cancer. They cannot get sick. Everybody else on your team is going to,
Why can't I work from home? She gets to work from home. Why can't I work from home?
as a leader, we can't ignore those conversations. We need to actually lean into those conversations. Have conversations with the team. Don't let them be surprised. If you see in individualizing, being fair and consistent, but individualizing the experience for your employees may cause the drama llama to come in, get in front of it. Have conversations around it. Our job as leaders is not to make everyone happy. It's to create a psychologically and physically safe environment where people can come in, be their authentic, transparent, and true self, which means sometimes people are going to butt heads. Sometimes we're going to have difficult conversations. But when we're doing our job well as a leader, we will not steer clear of these difficult conversations. We will lean into them because that's where we know trust and influence are built during those conversations. All right. That's it for this week. The first myth all about leadership is making people happy. We now know that is not the case. Leadership is not about making everybody happy, but we do know what leadership is. So thank you, my magic makers, for joining me for another week of unlocking the magic of leadership. Have an absolutely amazing week. And as always, don't forget, you got this. I'll see you next week.